Hello again, everyone. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm the industry programmer here at TIFF. And wow, people are starting. I think maybe we need to start having these sessions at 11 instead of at 10. Are you guys waking up now? Everybody had their coffee? Okay, good. All right, so we're going to move straight into our next session, pitching a tentpole. And I just wanted to, so the idea behind this, and I'll give you a little bit of background into how this session came about, is tentpoles, as you know, everyone's talking about them, they're all over the place. But we're still, the idea of how to structure the financing of these larger slates, these big budget films, things that carry a slate, is still a little bit of a mystery to many. And there's so many moving parts, and the financier and the distributor and the agent and globally. So this panel is going to really deconstruct some of the ideas between how to create the structures around these larger projects, these projects that seem larger than life. And then what are some of the challenges as we move forward to this type of role in the industry, these types of films that are taking a greater space in the industry. Moderating our panel today is Franck Priault. He's the film commissioner at Film France. And without any further ado, if you can help me welcome the panelists for pitching a tentpole.
Hi everybody, bonjour. As you will hear, I'm French, very French by my accent, so your mission in the next hour will be for you to understand what I say. That's tough. And so, in fact, we are going to be listening a lot to our panelists because their English is far better than mine. They are all there. I think I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Let's put it that way. Three of them, the first three here, are in a way bridging finance with movies. They might be working in financing structure, they might be consulting, advising producers and investors, they might be working inside a production company, but they are still in this finance-movie relationship. I think that's going to be interesting to listen to them and to understand what's their take on that? With this question, I guess many of you have, which is how to find finance? How does it work? What are the logics? I think that's going to be interesting to understand what are the business models. And we also have Pierre-Ange, which has been a very respected distributor in France too, but which is also he created with Luc Besson a French studio. The closest thing, I guess, to a US studio we have in France. So he has been finding the way to finance this company, and now the movie is producing as an independent producer for many years. So let's say he probably have both abilities. So this is it. Does that sound like a plan with you, guys? Okay. If any of you at some point would really like to ask a question, that's good. In fact, that was the idea too, at some point, to have a Q&A. So we'll go with the flow. If at some point we're becoming very boring, or even because you really have a question, feel free to raise a hand, and our panelists will answer the question. So does that sound like a plan for you too, guys? Okay. Okay, so maybe, Gregory, you should try to introduce yourself. What is the core of your job? Okay. And what kind of ability you're supposed to be good at? And
oh, wow.
I mean, what kind of... what would be the good reason people might want to meet you for?
I think I should leave the stage now then at that question. Hi, my name is Greg Chow. I started my career in Wall Street and then working in private equity and investment banking, and then moved over to the film business at CAA, and currently run a television and film production company based in Los Angeles called Rumble Entertainment. We have a film fund that we started with Wellgo USA. Wellgo is a leading distribution company focused on action, thriller, and horror movies coming from Asia and releasing them in North America. So we've started a film fund focused on, $15 to $50 million moderately budgeted movies in this genre for worldwide audiences. So I guess that's a long way of saying we're producers and financiers, kind of, as Frank said, bridging the gap between the production side and the financing side of the film and television business.
Marnie, would you explain who you are?
Hi, I'm Marnie Weishofer. I'm a managing director at Mesa. We're a boutique advisory investment bank based in New York, and I run the LA office. I've been in the entertainment industry for 20 years. I'm Canadian from Toronto. I live in Los Angeles now, though. Got my start at Alliance Communications in the mid-90s. I was there for 4 years, and the last deal that I facilitated for them was to merge them with Atlantis. I then left and went to Lionsgate. I was the chief financial officer there for 4 years and moved from Toronto to Los Angeles when the head office was moved, and then head of corporate development for 5 years. I did a lot of senior debt financings for them to facilitate their acquisitions and facilitate the roll-up strategy. I left Lionsgate in 2007 and was at Media Rights Capital for 4 years. Media Rights Capital is a film and television financing and production company, famous for House of Cards on the television side and A-level talent feature films such as Ted and Elysium, and left there in 2011 to open the LA office for Mesa. We are advisory, we do M&A, advisory buy-side, sell-side, as well as help raise capital from very senior down to the equity as well, and up and down the capital structure for, generally speaking, for slates, not single projects, production financing, as well as P&A financing.
Thank you, Marnie. Nick.
Hello. So my name is Nick Bauer. I also made the mistake of starting my career in M&A in Wall Street, but saw the light. And now I run the media division of Ingenious Investments, which is a film investment house, effectively. We invest in, again, all stages of the capital structure, from senior debt through to the equity, in a range of movies, from very small independent movies through to huge studio tentpoles. And our business is divided into different sections. So the studio business is, the capital is raised from a different place and the investment strategy is different, and the independent business, the capital is raised from another place, and we invest in various types of projects at various levels, and I can talk some more about that in due course. And we also have a TV business and a live events business and a wider media business around my section.
Thank you, Nick. Pierre-Ange, maybe you can introduce yourself, because you had a long career doing many things.
Yeah, very long. And I'm telling you, I'm very arrogant because I'm French, so I'm going to teach you a lesson. No, I'm dealing with a lot of these beautiful people because my job is more being a producer. And so I have the experience of having been the head of that French company Gaumont, and after I created that studio with my partner at that period of time, Luc Besson, EuropaCorp. And now I came back to my roots, which are to have a smaller company and trying to be only a producer. And I did my first 4 or 5 movies in 2 years, and I'm putting together my next 10 movies. Most of these movies are based from France as the production company, but they are international movies, English-speaking, most of them. Basically my job is to try to have always the best movies in the ratio quality on screen and money that you have to spent to make these movies happen and do the best deals with these beautiful colleagues so that money doesn't cost me too much and I can have some portions of the profits when the movie gets released. And I'm used to small budget, $4, $5, $6, $7 million movies, and I'm also used to, which are huge budgets for me, but they are limited to $35 million. I have never been experienced producing a movie of $100 to $120 million. Some other giants do this much better than I do.
And there was one thing Pierre-Ange didn't say about him, and I can say that this guy, Pierre-Ange, is also one of the, let's say, leading figures of the French film industry. It's an icon in our film industry.
And we say in French, who gives a fuck?
One question first for you guys. Why is there money out there that is looking for to be invested, that could be invested into movies, in fact? At the very beginning, why are there companies, banks, I don't know, you will tell us what kind of structures, why are there structures having money and ready to invest it in movies or in slate of movies? Why and not in, I don't know, a highway company or any other tech companies? Why? Any of you can answer that, in fact. Oh my God.
It's quite baffling, actually.
No, because I think it may be a very entry-level question.
It's a very good question, no, because it's always a struggle when you're raising money for movies. So the way that we invest, and I should have said, we have for the last 10 years plus had a strong relationship with 20th Century Fox. So we were a large financier of huge movies like Avatar, Life of Pi, the Planet of the Apes reboot movies, the X-Men movies. You would think it's relatively easy to raise money for those kind of titles, although I have to say films like Avatar and Life of Pi were a huge, huge gamble at the outset. But the way that we invest is we raise money for funds, not for single pictures, from our various groups of investors, and then we go on a discretionary basis and spend it. And it is a real challenge to raise the money in the first place. And you have to ask yourself the question, why would anyone want to do this, kind of invest in this crazy business, which is so risky, where people really don't understand very well the risks necessarily as investors, when there are safer or more traditional, property, for example. So most of our investors have been high net worth individuals, corporate investors, family offices, so it's not institutional investment. And I think there's a combination of things. The movie business is incredibly just attractive to people. People love movies, and people love to, I don't know, speak for everyone else, I work in the movie business because, tangentially, because I love film, no other reason. And a lot of investors invest because they love film and for no particularly better reason. But there are better reasons. Film is, I'm not sure how much it's true, but it's often touted as a non-correlated asset class. So it's an alternative asset class. People often want to allocate some of their resources outside of stocks and bonds and property into alternatives that potentially offer high return. People understand film to be non-correlated, by which I mean if the stock market tanks, that doesn't mean that the box office tanks. In reality, if the stock market tanks, it probably does mean that distributors have a harder time paying for projects, so prices in the wholesale market go down, so film producers and financiers may find life a bit harder, but sometimes we try not to talk about that too much. So non-correlated and actually very potentially attractive returns. So people can put money to work in an interesting way and make decent money from it, depending on where they invest. And the great thing about movies is they're projects like any other project financing. So you mentioned kind of highways, I think, or I used to do a lot of... Yeah, I did project financing in my youth, financing bridges or power stations. And there's always a senior debt financier whose money comes out first and earns a very low return comparatively, and then there are mezzanine financiers, and then there are equity financiers, and the film's just the same. Pretty much every film has a capital structure, and some people can choose to invest at the top of the structure, take a modest return, but be very certain of getting the money back. And others can invest, or one might say gamble, in the equity and, you know, potentially lose, but potentially win. And I think we can talk about ways of mitigating equity risk in film, which has really, I think, become much more the theme of today.
Thank you, Nick. Marnie, what would be your answer about this question, why? Why would they invest into movies?
No, I completely agree with the 4 great points that you made. I would also add that, you know, today I see a lot of transparency in financing plans, and so you can, you know, we build comparative films and comp sets, and so you can, you know, make comparison films of a similar budget, films with a similar release strategy, films with a certain level of talent. I would say that's number 5. Number 6, I would say, is that there are so many different ways to distribute, so many ways to generate revenues. So it's not just, obviously, 80 years ago you would go to a theater, and 20 years ago you would get the VHS, and now, you know, we were talking about television, just the television window itself. There's pay, there's free, there's digital. Windows are shrinking, windows are non-exclusive. You can layer up now, so there's a lot more ability to generate revenues. And also, I think the idea about being able to play in the level of the capital structure that you're most comfortable with. So the senior lenders know what they do. You know, they bank based on collateral. The mezz lenders have a certain more higher desired return, so they're going to play, you know, more junior to that, but they understand that. And then the equity participants, you know, like the back end. And overall, I would say the sexiness of the industry is very helpful.
Greg, Marnie and Nick mentioned 6 or 7 key factors. Would you add one, or?
The parties? Yeah. No, but I think in all seriousness, from our perspective, we look at investing in film from an intellectual property basis. I mean, I think what these guys are talking about from a macro level, yeah, there's alternative investments. You can look at non-correlated assets, but just if you're going to invest in the film business, you decide that we look at it on an intellectual property basis. We want to own the copyright the same way that someone wants to own the building down the street. And we see that with these new distribution models, having that ownership, you can figure out ways to monetize it down the road because you're going to own that for the, you know, conceivably for the rest of your life. And so as a distribution company, we were initially just leasing the film for 20, 30 years and then giving it back to the filmmaker once the distribution contract is up. Now we're making investments out of the film fund. We can own this, go up the value chain. Yes, there's more risk there, but there's also potentially more reward. And so we look at it as now we can own a piece of property, monetize that in many different ways, whether there's new distribution models that people haven't even come up with yet, and then ultimately build a library value. And having that library is how you're going to eventually get, you know, that 10-figure, 11-figure exit down the road, a liquidation event down the road.
And do you have the feeling that right now it's maybe easier to get financing for movies than 2 years ago? Or is there more money available, or is it because of the marketplace evolutions? You have more opportunity? What is the trend on that regard?
I see that there is a lot more money available right now, even than 2 years ago. At the senior level, debt level, there's a lot of competition. The pricing is the best I've seen since 06, 07.
Or the worst, from my perspective.
Yeah. There's a lot of investors that haven't invested in film, I'm finding, that are now coming into it, to the point that there's money and there's not enough rail cars or highways or bridges to invest in. So a lot of these larger funds are looking for something else to invest in, and they're willing to be educated on the entertainment industry and how they're going to be able to monetize and make the returns. And also, I would add, it's not just production financing. There's also obviously P&A financing. That's become very interesting lately, and that brings in a whole other group of investors. You know, the mezz type, you know, high yield investors. that don't want to end up owning a picture. So there's a lot of different ways to bring money into the system.
Pierre-Ange, so you have been an independent producer for 2-3 years now. Does what your colleagues are explaining here is reflecting what you feel? Like, do you have the feeling that there is more financing available right now to do what you do?
Yes. We are distributors, or we are movies producers, or we are TV producers, or we are financiers, but no one of us is a gambler. We are all, the global community of the movie industry is very professional. And because there is a real need in the whole world for, well, I would say the first need is water, and then food and education. But because there is also not so much hope about the real technical future of the world, like the seniors could teach to the people in the 60s. Today, the TV industry and the movie industry became really important in the global life. And there is a lot of possibilities of making business with good, well, smart, produced TV series or movies. So, and because the possibilities of investment in all the areas in the world are more and more difficult, the movie industry is attractive to financiers. And also because of the scale of the American studios and many of the important independent people who created that business since 20, 25, 30 years, and all of that becoming very professional, it's much more comfortable for financiers to understand what's going on with their investment. So, yeah, I won't teach a lesson saying this is an ideal world, but this is a good world, because this is professional people. Professional producers today are capable to say, hey, I want to make that movie for 10, but in the discussions with these financiers, they don't see a possibility of finances this 10. They would say, okay, we don't do the movie, we will postpone the movie until next year or 2 years later, when there is a market for that movie and the movie is possible. It could have been a bad thing for you guys, which are maybe a little bit more than as part of the audience, because you could say, fuck, the financiers are going to take control of the movie business, which is not good. But in fact, no, because they realized, because all of these people are smart guys, they need talents. And you still need a great visionary as a writer or as a group of writers for a movie. You still need a great director. And because all of that is so transparent, there is a lot of competition between all these movies. So yeah, you have to work a lot. You have to be very serious, very honest, I would say. The bullshit of the past is a little bit behind us. But this is a good world, yes.
Yeah, I have a lot of hope for the amount of financing coming into this business. It's a really good time, I think. To that point, just to dovetail on that, it's still going to be a creative industry, and even though more financing is coming in, there's more kind of numbers of people coming in. I think it's still a very creative. It's still a creative-based industry, and the transparency and the professionalism that you referenced is just allowing more people to come in and understand what's going on with their investments. And overall, even though the margins are coming down, the industry is getting bigger, and that's a really good thing.
Speaking of transparency, I think there is, again, maybe a very simple question that I have for you. And I think some of the people in the audience may be as stupid as me, meaning that they might be happy to have you explaining in a quick words, okay, let's go back. What do you define as equity, mezzanine, gap, the different categories of financing? Because I think it will help us to understand your explanation a bit later.
Yeah, so I would also add to what Pierre-Ange and Greg said. I mean, finances are very important, but in independent film anyway, it's possible, but very rare, that a producer will just go to a financier, pitch an idea, and then the financier will say, yes, I'll write a check for the movie or no. Actually, the financing decisions are all driven by prior creative decisions. So really it's a sales agent and their acquisitions people and their conversations with distributors and their acquisitions people that drive the building of a business plan for a movie, in my experience anyway. So most of the independent movies that we look at will come to us when there is a sales company on board, and that's an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, because for an independent financier who's essentially looking to the wholesale market of film sales to distributors to recoup, who the sales agent is, is vital. And then there'll be some key territory pre-sales in place, typically. And so the senior debt in the capital structure is the loan that a financier will make against the commitment of a distributor to pay an MG on delivery of the film. And the other main component typically is soft money. So you've got a, LA tax credit, UK tax credit, some combination of German subsidies.
French tax credit.
In France, like 90% of the movie is the tax credit. So it's, financiers have to understand exactly how those various subsidies and grants and tax credits and rebates work, how the film will access them, and then assess the likely value of them and lend against that. So that's the senior debt. People who are not taking any risk on the performance of the film. They're not even taking a risk on whether the film will successfully be completed, because there's always a completion bond. I mean, if the budget's over $1 million, say, who guarantees that the film will be completed? So they're just taking a risk on the counterparty of that contract. So the distributor who's promised to pay the MG on delivery, or the government who's promised in their legislation to pay a certain amount by way of tax credit. That's the senior debt. Then the mezzanine, as I would say it's typically understood, maybe there's a distinction between bank gap, which would be the bank saying, okay, these pre-sales are in place, the sales agent is a sales agent I trust, they have given estimates for the value of the unsold international territories. They may have given high, medium, and low estimates. I'm really not interested in the highs or the mediums. I'm only interested in the low estimates, and I'm not even really interested in all of the low estimates, but I'm going to put a line through some territories that are hard to sell, and then I'm going to discount the value of the others, because even the sales agents that we love, we don't necessarily assume that they'll do everything they hope to do. And then, so the bank gap will be a fairly conservative loan against the anticipated value of the unsold territories in the wholesale market. Now, if you've got a good quality sales agent who says, I can sell the remaining territories for 100, and a bank might typically say, well, I'm going to ignore the sales value you put against Spain because that's a tough territory, and a couple others I'll rule out, and that leaves me with 80, and I'll lend against that 80 of collateral, I'll lend 40. Then you might find a mezzanine financier who would be prepared to say, okay, well, I actually have faith the sales agent will do pretty much what they say, so I'll top up some part of the balance of the value of those unsold territories. And I want to be paid a bit more for the money, but and the equity essentially is the person who puts in whatever's left. So there may be some theoretically value in the international territories left. Very often the equity is a US gap, effectively, a bet on selling the film to the United States, or maybe there's a distribution agreement in place with a US distributor who's not paying an MG, or who is paying an MG, but the equity is taking a gamble, or not a gamble, but a considered kind of investment decision based very often on the kind of analysis Marnie's talked about, looking at the type of film, the comparables, the performance of those comparable movies, how they're distributed, what's your worst case, what's your best case, and then investing for the upside that could come from a strong domestic performance. So that's a simplistic and overview.
But a very clear one. Thank you very much, Nick. I guess it's useful for all of us. Same very basic question. Maybe Marnie, you could answer that, because your job is to, let's say, to connect producers with investors. So you know the different kind of investors, and actually, who are there? In fact, what are these different categories of investors which might be asked for money, and what are the different categories and what are the different kind of funds they might want to provide producers with?
Right. Well, as Nick mentioned, there's the senior lenders, and those are generally the bulge bracket, the larger commercial lenders, the JP Morgans, the SunTrusts, the Union Banks, the One West, the Bank Loomis.
The Ingeniouses.
What's that?
The Ingeniouses.
Yes, the Ingeniouses, of course. Then as you're moving down the capital structure, credit funds are now coming in to invest in productions as well as P&A, family offices, high net worths. And whereas a lot of those types of investors weren't in film, or they'd be in one-offs, but now they're coming in a more meaningful manner and coming into funds in a more meaningful manner. The idea with that is obviously the portfolio risk mitigation, which is very interesting. Rather than doing one-offs, you would have a slate of 3, 4, 5, 6 pictures, and they are crossed picture by picture. They can be domestic lending crossed into foreign. They're always looking for outside collateral, and as Nick mentioned, with the senior, if they're lending at 80 or 90%, there's that 10 or 20 that is not being borrowed directly through the senior facility. There's, on the mezz side, there's the unsold territories. So those are the types of participants in those.
Greg, you want to add something about this? And one thing is that, okay, so you mentioned the importance of mitigating the risks. So, and there is the idea of a slate. Could you elaborate about that? I mean, when you say a slate, how many movies is it? Or to what extent is it necessary to offer investors a slate rather than one movie? Is there, let's say, a threshold of minimum investment that there would be no point to look money for under that? How does it work?
I think you can get single picture financing, obviously. Putting a slate or a portfolio together helps with the returns.
Math.
I'm sorry?
It's math.
It's math.
Exactly. It's absolutely math. So, the higher risk, the higher the desired return, the lower the perceived risk, because you're crossing, as I mentioned, picture by picture or domestic against foreign. They're looking for how they're going to get out, how they're going to have their return of principal and then have their investment upside. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But I guess that when you say slate, like you mean 3, 4, 6 movies, at the time the financing body is talking with the producer, not all the 5 or 6 movies may be perfectly defined and known in advance. So I guess what is the key element? Is the producer ability? Is the track record of the producer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we were speaking about this earlier. Someone coming in and someone that's just graduated from film school that wants to put a slate together, that's going to be very difficult. We are always looking at the track record, the types of films, the genre that individual has made in the past, so what their experience is, how those films have performed, do they keep their projects, do they come in under budget, do they find distribution, those kind of things. And you wanted, it's better if you have. It was funny, we were talking about how some investors that we're speaking with, they'll say, can I read the script? Or, if something's already on film, like a P&A financier will like to go to a screening, or can I see the research? And I'm thinking as a financier, really, like you think you can pick a film, but, that goes to the sexiness, I think, as well. They like to be involved. So that would have a different risk perspective than an unknown slate. But then again, you try and put as much belts and suspenders around it, going to track record, and maybe you have green light authority over a budget at a certain range, a certain distribution strategy. They have to be over 2,000 screens. They have to be in this many territories. They have to have A-level cast. There's a bunch of different things, components of the films themselves that would determine the risk portfolio.
Pierre-Ange, Marnie and Nick were explaining how important it is to have a slate rather than not only one movie. Is it also something that you can feel in your job as a producer?
Not exactly. I perfectly understand the need. It's more comfortable for them to study slates because of the numbers. But no, I'm more of the culture of thinking about a movie per movie. For me, each movie is a unique artistic and economical vehicle, and each movie needs to be responsible of its own finance. But it's also very interesting to establish a relationship with partners on several movies, but we still consider the movie one by one, but we can study because when you are a producer and when you know that in the coming 2-3 years you will be doing maybe 6 movies, you also know that statistics tell you that not all of these movies will be successful. And you know what? Most of them won't be successful. Only 1 or 2 could be really successful, and it will be with grace. So your job is to, again, make the movie at the right price, and most importantly, deliver what you have promised. So when you said, I'm going to make that movie for 10, do it for 10, do it for 9.5. And when you have said to your sales company or to all your distributors, I'm going to deliver you that quality for the one that you have taken as a risk as an MG, really deliver your movie and spend time with them to emphasize the potential of that movie, because you always will find these people after in your life. This is how you build your reputation. So again, if some of you guys are students in the movie industry, be hard workers and work and establish good relationship with people. The movie industry today is about responsibility. This is finished the time of the dreamers and the crazy people. We still need crazy people, but they need to be managed.
One of you want to react to Pierre-Ange's point of view? Craig?
I did want to say one thing quickly, which is I think that really a refreshing change that I've seen over maybe the last 5 years is a move from producers saying, this is the movie I want to make and this is what it's going to cost, and now I'm going to go and find that much money, to actually a conversation with the market that says, this is a movie I want to make, what's it actually worth? Like, what can I sell it for? Realistically, what are people going to pay for this? And then I'd really like to make it for 10, but I've got a representative sample of people who know what they're talking about who are telling me, if I make it for 10, someone's going to lose $2 million, so I've got to make it for 8. And people will, really work hard to make it for 8. And then hopefully everybody wins. So that's an improvement, I think.
I have one personal question. Personal, I mean, because it reflects my job as the French Film Commissioner. All of us film commissioners in European countries or in American states, we are convincing our government to set up tax rebate, tax credit, all kind of grant system, which are, let's say, providing the producer of a movie like anything from, I don't know, depending 10 to 30% of what they spend on their territory. This is what is also called soft money in a way. To which all this money given by these public funds, to what extent does it change? Does it have an influence on the other financing? Is it cutting you off of good opportunities, or is it making the financing even more profitable? Because some money, there is free money on the table also. How do you deal with that? Or is it also something you're looking at in a way that you can cash flow this rebate? What's your view on this?
If I can touch on that. I think from when we look at films, we still start with the script and the creative elements. But it's definitely a big part of our conversation when it comes to financing. When we decide to board a project and produce a project and finance it, we always are starting with the writer, the director, the actors, has this movie been on screen before, et cetera, et cetera. But then when it comes to the finance discussion or when we're going to shoot it, we definitely look at what territories, what countries have certain rebates, what the caps are, if there are caps on talent, for above the line, if there aren't, what states have this, how hard is it to get, how How easy is it? How easy to get the money? Do they pay on time, et cetera? I don't know if it necessarily precludes us from doing any certain type of project because we want to shoot in X location or Y location, but it's definitely a big part of the conversation when it comes to setting up your financing plan and figuring out what locations to shoot at, and maybe if you can, get New York City, shoot certain location in Louisiana or shoot certain location in France, for example, we would try to do that to save the money to get the rebate.
But do you think that because there is free money given by Louisiana or France, that also make the deal for the financiers more interesting?
It definitely brings the overall cost of financing down because, as Nick mentioned, the soft money, the banks, the senior lenders will bank that paper. And there's certain jurisdictions that are well known, the Louisianas, the Canadas, obviously, where North American lenders will lend against a Canadian tax credit, 90%, in some cases 100%. So at very low interest rates. So, LIBORs plus, call it 3s and 4s. So very, very inexpensive financing that brings the overall cost of the project down.
Yeah, and I would say it's in a way, it's not that it makes movies more profitable, it makes them more possible. Because movies are a huge risk, and really, it's obvious and everyone knows it, but nobody knows whether a film will work or won't work. And so many things can happen between the fantastic script and the great director and the great talent who attach themselves to it and the release weekend of that movie. So wherever you can reduce investor risk and reduce your reliance on investors who have to take a large risk and also obviously want a large return in return for that, the more possible your movie becomes.
I guess there might be a few producers in this room, right? Yeah. Are there people who are not producers here? No, I'm joking. I guess many of these people would like to knock at your door, in fact, and to introduce you to their project, to their slates, maybe. Are there some homeworks that producers should have done before coming to you? I mean, what are you expecting for the producer to have already before contacting you? I guess the question is for all of you. Marnie, Nick, Greg.
That's a good question. I think the more fleshed out the pitch could be, have a clear understanding of how your movie's going to come together. Kind of, if you're talking to me, for example, we wouldn't do certain types of movies, so maybe you can do your homework on what movies we wouldn't do. So if you're pitching, I don't know. It's a hard thing to say. I don't want to preclude anyone from talking to me, but the point is, I think just do your general homework on who you're talking to, what kind of stuff they've done in the past, what their track record is. Maybe if there's articles about them, what budget ranges they're doing. We couldn't finance a $200 million picture, so that's something you have to go directly to the major studios for. But I don't think I'm not saying anything that you guys out there should know. I think it's just generally doing your homework and understanding who your audience is, and that's always a good lesson when you're pitching movies and knowing who you're talking to and what they're looking for.
Marnie?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I mean, you can have an idea, a producer wants a slate, he wants $100 million to go out and make 6 pictures. If they're not identified, let's take a step back. If he's starting out, it's going to cost this much. If he has a track record in the kind of films that he says he's going to put through the slate, it costs this much. If he actually has budgets, financing plans, cast attached, shooting schedules, locations scouted, it's going to cost this much. And then if he actually has, put something on the film already and has identified the projects. So I've got these 6 projects. These are the scripts. You can read them. This is the talent that's attached. This is my schedule over the next 2 to 3 years. This is how they're going to come about and be delivered, and that kind of thing. Then the financing is even more efficient.
Yeah, and I would echo what Greg said in terms of it's so important to do your homework about who you're talking to, because the biggest waste of time for a producer and for a financier is a conversation that hasn't been properly researched. So if you don't know, actually what I'd say is, in terms of contacting people, I wouldn't be afraid to drop an email to someone and just say, can you tell me what you need to have and you need to see from me before I approach you with my project? Because it's in the nature of producers, you've got to do kind of impossible things every day. And so it seems like a great thing if you can get some guy or woman on the phone and talk to them about your project that other people couldn't get on the phone. But if you're talking about your project at the wrong stage, you've just kind of blown your one opportunity to speak to them. So drop them a line and say, what do you need to see in place? And then people like us will say, okay, in my case, I would say, you need to have your sales agent on board, you need to have a couple of major territory pre-sales in place, and a finance plan, and you need to know pretty much where the other pieces of the finance are coming from, so I can see where we're going to slot in. And that's the time to come to us, not when you've got an amazing idea and a great script and a great director on board, but none of the distribution or financing or soft money locations thought through. Whereas other people are much more interested in the creative side and coming in at an earlier stage. So I would say you'd be talking to Greg at a very different stage of the process.
I'm not exaggerating. My office, you probably see the same thing. I would say on average 2 proposed film slates a week. So there's a lot of people trying to put slate financings together. And my first 2 questions are track record and identified projects. To me, those are the 2 most important things.
Pierre-Ange, what advice would you give to producers before knocking at these guys' doors? What?
Don't knock at their doors. I of course, but you see, I said I'm arrogant. No, I don't have advices to give to anyone. I think a good producer today doesn't work alone. He's in a group of people. They can exchange ideas. They have a lot of possibilities to discover the world of the business because they have different sensibilities. And they have to be in a position in which they don't need them, which means that when they will go to them, they will go to them to have serious, documented conversations. This is the best. When you reach these people, because also these people, they're in front of us, they're saying, hey, but they have also difficulties because they have competitors. They need to be on the best deals. When a producer has a great slate, or when a studio like 20th Century Fox, for example, I'm sure that Ingenious has to fight every year to keep Fox with them, because Fox could go any other place. When there is real business, there is competition everywhere. So it's difficult for everyone, even for them. So the best thing is to do a big mental effort and a big work to be sure that the day you meet, you are professional, you can deliver. When you can deliver, you can be on the same page, on the same level, and you can create business.
I would say absolutely. I hope I haven't come across as going, we're great. It is incredibly tough in the financing world at the moment because there's a lot of money chasing projects. There are not a lot of viable projects. And if you come to someone like Ingenious or any of the senior banks that Marnie mentioned with a project that works, that stacks up, people will be falling over themselves to give you money because we've all got money to deploy. We all have to make returns for our investors. And as Marnie said, tragically for us, currently there is a lot more money chasing senior debt opportunities and even gap mezzanine opportunities than there are viable films. So if you are prepared and you're coming with a plan that works, then I think you're knocking on an open door.
And I love that strong work ethic theme that you're talking about, Pierre. It's so easy. It's a lot easier nowadays to come with a more fleshed out project. You can film cheaper. You can put like a teaser footage reel together. You can, get people attached. You can get your friends together and work together and just put little, something together that you can show people. And the more of that you can do, and then come knocking on doors. And obviously, it has to be at the right stage. So if you're earlier, talk to producers that want to get in earlier. If you're a little later, then you can talk to someone like Nick, who you have your sales agent on board, et cetera. But the more work you can do with your friends, with your colleagues, with your industry contacts, I think putting together a package and coming in and talking to people at the right stage people will listen because there are very few projects out there, and there's a lot of money chasing those very few projects that are good. So put in the work up ahead of time, and people will listen. It's still a creative business, and people love new, fresh ideas that they haven't seen before. And especially with technology and the cost of everything coming down, it's a lot easier to get some of the stuff set up and running, and then come in and pitch it if you need additional funds.
Thank you, Greg. We have 10 minutes left, so maybe if there are questions, this gentleman over there, the fourth row. Maybe you could stand up, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm John O'Leary. I did a feature film which I self-financed, and as a second-time feature filmmaker, what would be the best approach? Should I get myself an established producer that has, what would be the best step? Which, a star?
To do what?
To make another feature, to get financing in place. I mean, you say to put together a good deal before you go to certain lenders, but
I guess the question, should you find yourself first? What should you're a director?
Yeah, as a director, what should I look for first?
I don't know if any of you will answer. I guess it would be to find a producer with the track record that might be also attracting for financiers. Do you agree? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Over there. There is a cap with a P.
My name is Simon, and I'm a screenwriter and actor. And I just made a short that won a few awards, so I'm looking at moving on to feature film now. My question is specifically for Mr. Chow, Gregory, if you don't mind. It's kind of based on what Stuart Ford was just talking about in terms of the Chinese market. I suppose my question is, when I spend time in Beijing, I noticed that there's a real sort of thirst for sort of Western culture within Beijing and Shanghai as well. Like they have these sort of huge boards that have sort of all the kind of Western stuff that we have going on here. And obviously they have a thirst for Western stories. Yet at the same time, there's a lot of issues there with censorship. And I'm just wondering how you sort of approach the Chinese market in terms of looking at projects that could be viable within their market that will also pass through sort of the censorship channels that they have there. Specifically for digital projects that we'd be looking to make for, really low budget to then access that market. Okay. And also what the thirst is like for stars. Does the star system that exists here in the West necessarily translate within that market? Or is there some kind of trend that you see there within the stories that they absorb and that there's a market for that sort of low-budget filmmakers could move into?
I guess the question is also, if I try to summarize it, is also how can you assess markets such as China in financing plans?
So to answer the first question, I think when we look at stories and censorship, it's tough. It's cloudy for a reason. They keep it that way so that they have always. It's kind of like the tax law in the United States. It's always cloudy, so you can't walk up to the line and say, hey, look, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this. You have to agree to let me in, or you have to agree to this. It's cloudy. So with regards to whether we try to get stories past the censorship thing in China, it's kind of a black box that you go and you hope to get approved. Obviously, there's certain themes that you have to stay away from, whether it's time travel, revisionist history, or certain horror themes that they've proven in the past to deny. As far as your question about some of the digital stuff, I don't really have experience doing the digital stuff in China. We work with a lot. We have actually a small distribution apparatus in China, but we're kind of like trying to build a footbridge, just like everyone else is trying to build a bridge. I mean, we're not trying to build a superhighway yet. We're just trying to do a couple deals back and forth with China, get some money across. We're helping actually some producers produce films from China in the United States, and likewise, we're producing some films with Chinese co-production companies in mainland. I don't know. I guess that's a long-winded answer saying there's no real good answers because China on purpose is keeping it cloudy so no one can actually just figure it out, and they always have a way out to say, hey, this doesn't pass, this doesn't pass. it's just the Chinese market the way it is. Everybody knows it's a large audience. Everyone's trying to get over there. But right now, we're just trying to build that footbridge and hopefully become a superhighway in a couple of years.
Over there.
First, thanks.
Please wait for the mic.
I think this is for Nick and Moni. Could you talk a little bit about P&A financing?
Sure. We've done actually a fair bit of advising on P&A. Generally speaking, slates of P&A are easier. It's difficult to get P&A on a single project, to get financing, P&A financing, although we've attempted it a few times. Again, there's a hope that you can get risk mitigation with several films. Just for the general audience, the rule of thumb on P&A is last money in, first money out, which is attractive to a certain set of investors. A couple of things to think about with P&A is, it can be very successful. The movie can open very well. That's a good thing, but it's a bad thing for a P&A investor in some cases because the money isn't outstanding long enough. So a lot of P&A investors will require a minimum yield, generally 1 year of return. So you could be paying for something that you're not utilizing. We've seen a bunch of different structures. Some P&A deals to that point are a set fee. There'll be a certain fee that you're not paying a current interest coupon, but you're paying an upfront fee, and that is what you'll be paying for the length of the P&A term. We've seen P&A deals where the P&A will be lent, generally speaking, call it 90 days before the theatrical release, and then other financings can take you out of that. So, for example, you lend P&A. There are other P&A lenders that are basically factoring the receivable, so they will look at how the movie performs opening weekend and will maybe lend 2 times that against P&A, so that you can take out the initial P&A financier with that, and then if 6 to 8 weeks after that, you're getting an ultimate from the studio, so they're saying based on the theatrical, this is what we expect the downstream media will do, then you can bring in an ultimates facility to take that out. So those facilities, generally speaking, those P&A facilities will have a high upfront fee and then a lower coupon. We do a lot of domestic P&A financing that are crossing with other films or will cross into foreign, for example. As we were talking about, people are looking for any way to get out, so they'll come in junior on the foreign performance. There's just a whole bunch. I've seen, there's 10 or 12 different structures. People are being very creative, but it's a very hot spot for mezz-type lenders, in the low teens. I think P&A for a while was probably 18 to 20, even 20, low 20s. Generally speaking, now I'm seeing combined upfront and coupon in the mid-teens, and even coming down a little bit from that.
There's a question over there on the first row.
Hi, my name is Nadia Marzuka. I'm a film student at Ryerson. My question is mostly around where the return is coming in the film business, because I know there's a lot of people like pirating movies online nowadays. And is the return mostly relying on the box office still, or is there other mediums that people are looking into for the investors to regain their money from movies?
Yeah, I guess. It's pretty rare that anyone makes a return as an investor in film from box office alone. Generally, theatrical release is a loss leader to drive ancillary revenues downstream. And there is a lot of piracy. That's a huge issue, obviously. But still, for movies that work, it's a side issue. In fact, a lot of investors in film, and certainly our investments in film in the main, are not box office contingent at all, because we're financing movies that will be sold on an international sales model to distributors. Then distributors are paying in advance for the movie, and they're taking the risk on the performance in their territory. Even if the film does no business at all, the advance they've paid is non-refundable, and that's where we look to recover our money. To the extent then you're taking a kind of mezzanine or an equity risk on performance in the US or something like that, then those kind of issues are critical. But I think what's really exciting about, or one of the many things that's very exciting at the moment, is this complete proliferation of distribution models. So very often now, you might choose not to go theatrical with a movie. You know, if a movie's got great cast and it's a strong genre proposition, but it just didn't work quite well enough to hold up a 2,000 plus screen release, you might do an exclusive VOD window with like DirecTV, and actually make a lot more money and spend a lot less in P&A, a tiny fraction of what you'd otherwise have to spend in P&A, going ultra VOD, and then maybe even a small platform release after that to make it kind of theatrical or day and date. And movies that don't work in the theatre can still have a life on DVD and digital afterwards. And
yeah. Pierre-Ange, Nick was using the word how exciting is it because of all these changes in the distribution platform. Is it the way, and I guess it's going to be the end, is it also the way you see it, like an exciting word because the distribution platform are changing?
Yes, it is. And he's right. Many movies today could not be released in theaters because it became difficult, or the market is too difficult for these movies, but they have a real life on digital. And she's right also, piracy is a problem, we know about it, and everybody is taking care the best they can about it. But again, I would only deliver positive messages because the world is global. The old studio Anglo-Saxon model, which means you have to do only American movies to dominate the market, is over. There is a real, this is great that the studios are still strong, and Warner's, Fox, Paramount, all these guys need to be very smart for the future because they show the way, and they know how to entertain the audience with huge movies. But they don't have so much the capacity to identify the average sized movies. And in the whole world, from Belgium, from China, from South America, from Argentina, from the United States, Canada, anywhere, people can get movies produced. And the global system of distribution make the life of these movies much more possible today than before. And this is great. This is, of course, the internet, but this is also the change of the mind of the people. So yes, if people are in that theater, they want to be producers, they have to believe in that business. They have to know they have to do a lot of work, but there is a real need for good movies in the whole world, from anywhere in the world, not only from the United States.
Thank you, Pierre-Ange. That's the perfect conclusion. I'm afraid we are over, guys. I'm sorry. Somebody's waving me, telling me that it's over, so I have to obey. Thank you for being so nice. Thank you, Pierre-Ange. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Gregory. It was a pleasure to be with you and to be moderating such distinguished speakers. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frank. And we'll get started right away again at 11:45 with our lightning round talks. Thank you. And off the stage.